Hello and welcome to the ReluTech Podcast. Today I'm very excited to have an interesting and unique partner with us. We have Ken Henderson, the COO over at Cloudamize, joining us. Welcome, Ken.
Hello, hello.
I'm excited today because many in the cloud partner space are probably familiar with the name Cloudamize. Many of the end users who maybe are looking at migrating to the cloud, perhaps are already in the cloud, might not be as familiar unless they've been kind of hands-on in a migration in the past. So I wanted to welcome Ken to explain a little more about the Cloudamize platform, give our viewers some insight into Cloudamize as a company, their history, where they're at today and where they're going, and talk about some new additions to the platform that maybe even some partners might not be fully familiar with. So Ken, just to start things off, I want to just have you tell us a little bit about the Cloudamize platform. Walk all of our listeners through, what does Cloudamize do?
Cool. So Cloudamize at this stage in the game is a platform that consists of 7 core components. And those core components are really helping customers go end to end from discover all the way through to in-cloud modernization. And so those are going to be discover, analyze, plan, migrate, extend, manage, and modernize that we have today. And I'll start with just a little overview of each one of those, and then we'll go into a little bit more in depth onto one that I think we're going to talk about here today. But it all starts with discover, right? That's where we'll deploy one of our 3 standard data collection methods. We have an agent, an agentless, or vCenter connection to get that good, rich data. We'll typically recommend for a minimum of 2 weeks for data collection from customers and partners, but that can really span to 4 to 6, whatever makes sense for the customer. We get all of the server telemetry data, all of the application dependency data. We're collecting data on our agent for every 30 seconds. So it's a rich amount of data that we're collecting in that space. Once we get it back, we process that data, we bring it to our analyze component. Analyze is going to give us the ability to kind of visualize all that data as we would extrapolate it over to run on a year in any one of the clouds, and what that TCO may look like, especially when you start to layer in some cloud savings plans to be able to help reduce some of those costs. But we're really good at bringing in that right sizing recommendation. Again, all that data we collected, we know exactly what's running on that server, and we know exactly what instance type it would take to run in a particular cloud. So that's one of the core values that we bring to the table for 14 years now, is okay, I've discovered this and it's going to be right-sized on this cloud as that type of emotion.
And that's constantly, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there, but that's constantly one of the big concerns when someone's going to the cloud. How do I get this set up so I'm actually benefiting from the cost efficiencies, right? Because they might look at, if I had the exact same servers when I hop right over and I don't consolidate because your utilization maybe was lacking in your on-prem setup, there's a lot of money to be saved. So a tool like yours, obviously, especially for these SIs who've done migration after migration, it's extremely familiar for these steps in the process. And I'd say most of them, to some extent, use your tool for their processes.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's the reality is of what you see happening, especially when you're going from a data center to a cloud, is you are well over provisioned in most cases in that data center. And so that motion you take to really kind of right size and understand what you have is so key to going to the cloud in a cost efficient manner in there. And so it's been a space that we've been working in for many, many years, but it's also the launching point for, I think, where we've been spending at least the past few years, is to really get to help kind of bridge that gap from assessment, being an assessment-based tool 14 years ago, to an actual platform that helped to bring it to actual migration. And so that's where the plan component comes in. We'll pick up on those application dependencies that we found. We'll help you do just released last year, some AI augmented grouping if you want to take things in a very server-centric route, or you can go the application-centric route, look at all the dependencies, group together your core business applications, apply some tags, ultimately get things grouped properly for that migration, which then sets the stage for the actual replication of servers into the cloud, right? So our migrate component, as it stands today, it helps with the automated deployment in AWS. AWS's MGN agent. We can do all that behind the scenes right from our own agent, preventing partners and customers from having to locate servers and groups and deal with permissions of installing things. We do all that behind the scenes and really help with that replication and expedite that process in a very clean and easy way within the platform itself. The managed component that we've got kind of spans across everything that I just mentioned in there. It's not as traditionally people would think when they think of manage in the cloud. They think of managed services and more of a FinOps type lens to it. For us, it's a team orchestration tool where we'll provide the concept of runbooks, and then each runbook has a series of tasks, right? Your project management 101 stuff. What differentiates us in this space is going to be the ability to tie those tasks into key metadata. Who's the application owner? What application are we talking about? Do I want to tie this to a replication group to automate that replication at a certain point in the flow? So there's a lot of value as you look, especially the larger global partners that have a large migration they're working on, setting up that type of workflow and task list for, could be the assessment, could be the planning, could be the actual migration inside of there. So it's a nice tool. It's probably about a year and a half old that we released. So there's still a lot of active work and feedback that's happening around that one as well.
Yeah, and then kind of to that point, because you can plan to the moon, but if you don't actually kind of have a consistent way of managing and following said plan, I've seen it happen before where things fall apart, you start to run behind timelines, and then migrations get delayed, which there's always costs associated to it. So kind of seeing that full funnel all the way down is really a huge thing as far as, okay, sometimes customers get a plan, they're like, okay, now what?
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting. That's probably the number one point of feedback that we got initially from partners in the space was, can I export and import? Can I have a library of these that I can quickly bolt on my plan for each one of these things? And so it's in the roadmap for that one as we continue to kind of evolve in that space. The next component that we've got in the stack here is called Modernize. Today, that is in cloud only, and that is the licensing and database real-time modernization recommendations that we are making. This actually is going to get overhauled this year, starting next month. So by the end of March, we'll be releasing container-to-container recommendations, and we're kind of pulling Modernize down the stack to the Analyze component, where we're going to be doing a lot more pre-cloud. And this is probably one of the biggest recommendations we're having in the Modernize space is less in the in-cloud, more on the pre-cloud, as we're trying to get to the cloud, embracing more of the cloud-based services along the way. And so that is one for us that I think we're going to see a rather large overhaul, but really see it kind of span a little further down the stack.
So right now you're kind of more in a migrate, you've been in a migrate then modernize kind of approach with a lot of your customers and partners, but that's going to be shifting to kind of get a little more front end oriented.
When it comes to the applications, yes, I like to think of it like when we do the motion of bringing a customer that right sizing, I like to think of the right sizing as an infrastructure modernization as you're going from data center to actual cloud. But yeah, you're 100% right. As you start to look at things through the application, which is what every cloud recommends, is when you get there, okay, what services do I offer? Okay, so I should embrace some of that. And essentially you look at the cost of compute essentially going down as you embrace more of those cloud-based services and do things that are going to ultimately make your teams function faster as well in there. And so the whole notion of how do I embrace more of the services, how do I look at those application modernizations earlier, is something that we want to be able to offer. The thing that we're very, very good about is that we don't like to dictate an approach. We're a partner's partner. We work very strongly with a lot of partners that take different approaches, right? And some of those different approaches are just based off of clients and their needs. Like if I need to get out of my data center in 6 months, I probably can't go an application-centric route. I need to go a simple kind of server. I need to go fast lift and shift and look at some of that a little bit later, versus if I've got some time and I want to do that application-centric approach, how would I approach that with some intelligence that wouldn't stretch the process out to 3 to 4 years? And so those are ones that we're pretty adept at working with those partners and customers and advising them, at least this is how you would embrace the certain elements of the platform to really help it streamline that.
I like how you mentioned that, just because the idea of modernizing your infrastructure approach is obviously one big half of the equation, but that doesn't mean your application is efficient with how it runs on infrastructure. And it's something that a lot of companies, when they were building their application, weren't necessarily thinking about top of mind. They're trying to build the best application for their need. So no, it's really interesting that you're going to be kind of diving more into that space and helping people get a more front-loaded mindset on how do I make this application work best in the cloud when I'm there, right? Because that's the other side of it.
Yeah, 100%. And the last component that we'll be talking a little bit more about today, so I'm not going to dive into it, is what we call extend, or the concept of extensions, right? And so we'll talk a little bit about that later in here, so we're going to dive deep into what that specifically looks like. But before I go there, I think what I want to tell is a little bit about the company background itself, because we've gone through some rather material evolution just in the past year. So I'll take a minute to kind of lay out where we are and where we're headed in that space as well.
Yeah, because I mean, as I mentioned, all of our partners are probably familiar with you. Many of them may not be familiar with where you're at right now. So I think this will be really informative for all of them.
Cool. So we've been around for over 14 years this year. So we've been in the industry for a while. And a lot of the competitors that we faced early in the stages of the company have either, been consumed by other SIs, GSIs, or been privatized for that. And so we've been one of the longer running platforms out there, and we're extremely proud of that. We still have some of the very first people that helped build the company in the actual team. So it's very, very cool. As I mentioned, though, like 14 years ago, we were looked at an assessment tool. Like it was all about multi-cloud assessments that we were running at that particular stage in the game. And really, the goal has been, specifically in the past 3 to 5 years, is to changing that messaging. It's like, we're not just an assessment tool. We can do so much more. And so, it's really kind of been bridging that gap from assessment to actual migration through, componentizing the platform and emphasizing some of the additional kind of capability that exists in there. From 2017 to kind of mid 2025, Cloudamize was owned by a couple different GSIs in that space. And so it went through a time in the company where it was purchased and kind of part of some different brands at the time. CloudReach was one of the first, Cloud Atos being kind of the last ones they were with. But in mid 2025, so last year, almost a year ago, coming up here, we executed a separation of Cloudamize from that parent company. And so the important point here that we are talking to a lot of folks apart, we are now running completely independently. And so that gives us a lot more autonomy to really focus on, what we want to do in the roadmap itself. It gives us more autonomy to come alongside partners and figure out, how can we work with you to ensure kind of mutual success as we're looking at what we are trying to accomplish together in there. And so we're really excited about that. The last half of last year was very operational. It was, okay, now we're out and independent. We probably have to figure out how to build entities and pay people, all that good stuff that it's almost like you've got a 14-year-old startup that you're kind of working through.
Payroll's nice to have, especially when everyone's been there forever and you're like, I thought this just happened, right?
Yeah, it's good to be able to pay people. Yeah, that's an important part of the business, right? So, yeah, but it set the stage for us to run into this year with a lot of energy, right? Because, we nailed all that down, we got all the fundamental stuff kind of going down. But starting this year is really the focus on the roadmap. It's the focus on the partnerships, and really, to what we're going to talk about here in just a moment, and that is, how do we partner in a meaningful way with people, right? And I think that's where the concept of extend, or what we'll call extensions, was kind of born from, right? It was a very early conversation with the ReluTech team and saying, hey, we're kind of in the same space. We're trying to get customers to understand some of the value that we can bring to the table early stage. And you, Cloudamize, are in there doing these assessments, and the first thing they see is that great TCO. They see this kind of plan to say, if I'm going to a particular cloud, like an AWS, here's what it's going to cost, and here's what you can save by applying right sizing and by applying a savings plan and some other options that are inside of there. At that same token, wouldn't it be lovely to be able to present some of the, what ReluTech can save, right? Whether that be through some data center buyback type of elements, or whether it be through, VMware licensing kind of optimization that occurs inside of there. And so as we're thinking through that, it was really like, yeah, we agree. It would be awesome to be able to partner. We have no desire or intent to get into that space. So, better together being the kind of mantra that we were thinking through. But as we
found each other kind of at a good time, right? Like when we approached you guys, it was more because obviously you're in this assessment space, and You're coming into migrations really early, and the things that we do all benefit from earlier knowledge of what's going to be happening, so that we can make sure that we're getting numbers in front of customers as quickly as possible when their gear is less depreciated, when potentially they have some maintenance contracts that are coming up for renewal or refresh, but they haven't done it yet. If we don't know until after, obviously that's less beneficial for the people we're trying to help migrate. And we reached out to you guys, and I'm guessing you already were cooking up extensions before we reached out a little bit. But I think the timing worked out really well, because we were saying, hey, how do we plug into what you do? It's like, well, actually, we were just trying to figure that out. So,
right. Yeah, it's perfect. And I mean, the thing about it too is what you guys offer in that space also lowers the barrier to entry for many customers that are approaching it, because you're going to find customers that are sitting right on the cusp of being able to go to the cloud and looking at that TCO and saying, is that in the right space? Is that going to save us the money that would justify the move to the cloud? But then you can bring another layer onto that and say, well, I can save you some more money. And sometimes that's just enough to be able to kind of push it across. And so we thought that is a very, very valuable way to kind of partner with you all and kind of bring that further in the stack. The question was then, how do we do that in a way that, is a framework, right, for potentially, bringing in,
right?
additional partnerships for this.
And I think that's an important thing to consider. A lot of the people on the services side, everything's done by an email, right? Or maybe it's a Slack message, or, maybe there's a shared Salesforce instance or something, which is great. But the reality is, with the software platform oriented thing, you're trying to get things automated, especially in the event, which for you guys trying to be a partner's partner, high volume occurs, where we need a lot of these processes to be able to happen like clockwork, not that there's going to be a bottleneck that is basically generated by how much staff is there managing it.
Yeah, exactly right. And I think, from our perspective, getting that early access was key, and creating that framework to get you all into that early access was the goal. And that's where, that's where the concept of extensions was born, is how do we take, and fundamentally what we're doing is taking the data that we've already collected, right? We spent, again, 2 to 6 weeks collecting all this data and marrying that with logic that partners like ReluTech have. And again, this is an important fundamental principle that I'll lean into a couple times here, is we are not sharing data outside of the platform. We're taking logic that you have given us, ReluTech has given us, or any partner has given us, and putting that into the platform, but creating value, and not just a generic value, but customer tailored value. So the number of servers that we found and the number of specific flavors of server get infused into your logic to then create an offer to them to say, here's how much we can save you based off of that. And so, it's very compelling for a customer that comes in there to say, that's very interesting. And it's not just a billboard offer I'm seeing. It's something that was built to my exact data set. Wow, pretty cool. Let me reach out and talk to him. And so that's the framework that we're thinking, how do we create this in a way that is, again, like repeatable is a great word used in there. And that was the concept of extensions was born. Let's build a marketplace that we can partner with some other third-party tools and friends that are out there in the world, that gives a little bit of a stage to those partners, but also brings value to all the customers that come through the platform on an annual basis, right?
Yeah, because we're not the only one like that. As far as it goes, there's a lot of different partners that are bringing interesting value props to these migrations that are going to potentially accelerate them, are going to potentially lower the cost burden of migrating, or potentially improve the TCO once migrated. But how do you get it out there? How do you make sure it's built in? It's kind of like Carvana, kind of some way what we're doing, where we're trying to give you an estimate on, what your assets are worth, but at the same time trying to make it where it's relatively private. To your point, I think that was one of the trickier parts, where we were trying to make sure our logic could be shared in a way that was able to be shared through your system. And I think that's why it's going to be important for other partners to work closely with you on that. Because I think to something you mentioned earlier that we didn't dig too much into, with you separating from Atos, that's a big change in your history. For a while now, you've been associated with kind of a singular GSI, even though you sell your platform outside of that, but it creates a just, I guess, complex of competition.
It's a barrier.
Exactly.
It's the barrier. Yeah.
Yeah. So in this sense, you're able to operate more as the partner's partner without any conflicting interest or perceived conflicting interest. So I think that's what's really cool, where we were able to be like, okay, obviously we don't really compete with GSIs, but we're willing to share our logic to make this work. And I'm sure a lot of other GSIs now can have a lot more confidence doing something like that, because they're like, okay, this isn't our competitor. This is actually basically our ally.
Yeah, and that's 100% right. We're trying to build this in a way that is competitive in there, and trying to build a marketplace that has a synergy behind it for the value that it can bring to the table in there. So I think if it's cool, I think the easiest way to kind of to visualize this may be helpful. And so I'm going to share a screen and just kind of pop open what we've got today and show the world here.
Let's dig into it.
Awesome. Let me know when you can see that coming through.
I can.
Awesome. So this is the dashboard that you hit within Cloudamize when you first come into the console for a particular engagement. We've named this one Demo Company for a real original name here. You will see all 7 components across the top. Some of these will be locked out, just depending on the plan you've got. But again, these demo environments are available if customers and partners say, hey, it'd be helpful to put hands on them. We have the ability to kind of spin these up pretty quickly for folks. You'll see the discover, analyze, plan, migrate, manage, all the good stuff that you would take to go across the journey. None of this is available when you first come into the platform. When you first enter the platform, the only thing you'll see that's highlighted as active is discover, because you got to get the data.
Nothing
first,
to
right?
analyze, nothing to plan,
Right.
nothing to migrate.
Right. So it's not real exciting until you actually get that data analyzed. Once you do that, all the rest of these will light up and give you the ability to interact with them in there. And then below there, of course, we got some good old quick links, recent releases, little teasers for what we're working on and what's coming soon inside of there. But let's dive into what extensions looks like today. Again, kind of a landing screen for the marketplace. We're going to emphasize this a couple of times through here, so forgive me for that one, but really leaning into that kind of data privacy element to the point of the data that we have collected in here is staying in here. And the ReluTech is a great example. We're bringing in your logic through an API. It's not us pushing the data to you. It's us pulling your latest parameters into some equations that we use to produce the value inside of here. And so
what's interesting to kind of like talk about that for a second, for our partners who maybe are interested in an extension, that might seem like a limitation and, oh, I'm not going to get it. But the other side of it is that your customers that you are using Cloudamize with have their data protected. It's making sure that every time data is being shared in any way, there's degrees of consent that have to happen for that to happen.
Yeah, 100%. And that is, I mean, we deal with a world where we are working around people's data, right? The things that we collect in Cloudamize, which is very interesting, people assume as an assessment tool, you're reaching into the server and you're pulling a lot of information. You're actually not taking anything out of the server. You're talking about server telemetry data or server to server communication, but there's oftentimes a perception of anxiety, not a perception of anxiety, but anxiety around running an assessment because of that type of element. So we're very cognizant of that across many different components that we do. And anytime we're partnering to make sure that it's very clear what we're doing there. But let's dive in. So over here, you're going to start to see more and more kind of partners built out in here. But right now, ReluTech is the star. It's the number one at the top that you see recommended here. So as you come into that, you're going to see a screen that is tailored specifically to this engagement. So if you're an end customer, it is your customer data that you have inside of here. And the top of the screen is what I like to call really the hook, right? It is the, hey, what can we do for you at a very high level, and how are we kind of expressing what that savings looks like? And so the upfront cash infusion or some of the savings over the migration period are the numbers that are kind of at the very top of the screen, and then breaking that down across some of the various kind of categories that come in with that. I think the important element that, again, we talk about data a lot in here that we wanted to be very transparent is, what are we using to form the basis for these particular estimates and numbers that we're putting in here? And so you will see at the bottom here everything that we used. So number of physical storage, some storage elements, the networking components if they show up, some VMware servers or cores per VMware servers estimated inside of here. Some of these you're going to see comes from the back end or directly sewn in from the actual assessment that we ran, but we're going to give you the ability to adjust those. So if a customer comes in and says, you know what, I'm not going to take all 15 of these. I only really want to do a certain subset. So maybe it's 10. You see these numbers updating real time, because we want to make sure they've got the ability to tailor it to what makes sense, but then get a feel for then what does that do to this particular offer? Or if they come in and say, well, it's not going to be 24, it's actually going to take me much longer. You see those numbers kind of go back up. And so, again, exposing the data we're collecting and we're using, so it's very transparent, but giving the ability to tailor that specific offer to the customer was an important concept that we wanted to ensure was captured in the extension.
No, and as far as that goes, I think it's really cool because for customers, they might be doing an analysis on one particular migration coming up, but they maybe haven't thought about some future workloads coming up. We tried to make this a bit interactive for people where they can start to tweak the numbers of their storage network gear, things like that, even servers. So you can maybe start to get an idea of, okay, across multiple data centers, multiple assets, what could actually be sitting in our closet, right? That was a big factor for us because we think a lot of people, when they're migrating, don't actually realize how much value exists in where they're at right now, right? So that's why we wanted to make sure we found a way in here and found a way to make this, visual for a customer. They can really see how things move when they kind of adjust the composition of gear.
Yeah, 100%. But ultimately, what we want and what the customer would serve best to is let's go in, let's engage kind of ReluTech in this particular. If this is of interest to me and I want to learn more, there's a couple of call to actions in here that basically will pop open this. We will take the name and email information that we have as from the user that's logged in, but we'll give them the ability to say, that was a shared user or another user. I want to put my actual information in here. We'll give some consent to share the data that we use in the background directly with ReluTech, if that would be helpful to facilitate that conversation between customer and ReluTech, and any other notes that are associated with that. And so this is essentially going to help bridge the gap from us to ReluTech, and the customer is going to fire off an email with a summary of what the offer looks like and the acceptance of shared data if that's checked in here, and really help set that next step up with ReluTech in there. So that's a little bit of I think an overview of the concept of extensions themselves, a little bit of example specifically of the ReluTech one that we've got today. Our roadmap that we've got in here is basically to continue building. Right, for us, it is we love the concept. We've seen some great interest happening and a lot of questions and a lot of since we released the first one, and this is just in December, so it was just about 3 months ago that we did this. Lots of conversations exploring, whether that's security partners or day two or advanced migration paths. There's a whole bunch of various ways that things that we don't necessarily want to get into as Cloudamize. We're good at what we do. We can't tackle the world, but why not partner with the world? And so that is really the goal for us, is to continue building on that and create a really meaningful marketplace for customers and partners that are going through that journey.
It's exciting. As far as it goes, ReluTech here, we kind of come from a similar story to where you're at now when Relus Cloud got acquired and we became our new version of ReluTech, where we're taking some of the fundamental things that were really helpful to Relus Cloud, but able to kind of do those at a broader scale, use those with other partners as opposed to as a competitive edge against other partners. And I think for a lot of partners who maybe haven't seen your platform in a while, some of these modernized features are things that maybe they have not used in their migrations up to this point. And obviously extensions being brand new is something that a lot of them can start to think about, because to your point, many of them have their own proprietary technologies that are specifically for how do we assess and help a customer migrate. So this could be a huge way for them to get top of mind with customers who are going through here.
Sure. Yeah. And one thing we didn't talk about too is a little bit of the cloud funding options that exist to help lower that barrier even further for customers. When you package some tools and platforms like Cloudamize and surrounding ISVs together, what they're able to do with funding kind of really is amazing, especially on the AWS side of the house, to really lower the barrier to entry for customers and partners.
Yeah, as far as it goes, we're partnered with a few chip companies. We're partnered with a variety of different organizations that all have different funding programs for migrations to the cloud. So it goes past just what we're able to do as far as directly for your on-prem data center equipment right now. There's so many different options that different partners are bringing to the table. So I'm excited. I'm excited for our partnership. I'm excited for you guys to see how you guys interact with all of these different partners in a unique way through extensions. I'll take being the only one there for right now. We know we love the top of mind awareness over here at ReluTech, so we love that for the time being, but we'll welcome neighbors as soon as they show up.
Yeah, indeed.
Awesome, Ken. Well, as far as it goes, I think I've taken enough time from you today. I know you're pretty busy over there. Glad payroll's now getting made, so it sounds like you've got your feet under you. But we'll probably talk again sometime in the future when some big additions have been made. We can maybe update the viewers, but I appreciate your time today. And to all our viewers, always reach out to Ken or myself if you want to know more about Cloudamize.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate the time and the ability to talk a little bit about the product and the partnership.
Thanks, Ken. Well, you have a good rest of your day, and thanks to all our viewers. Y'all have a good one as well.
All right. Cheers.